The fluorescent lights of St. Mary's Hospital hummed above me like dying wasps, casting everything in that sickly yellow glow that made even healthy people look half dead. I sat in the uncomfortable plastic chair outside the NICU, my body folded into itself, trying to take up as little space as possible. That's what poverty teaches you, how to make yourself invisible, how to shrink until you're just another shadow against the wall. My daughter had been born 3 weeks early. 3 weeks that felt like 3 lifetimes as I watched her tiny chest rise and fall behind the incubator glass, tubes and wires connecting her to machines that beeped and whirred with mechanical indifference. The nurses were kind, their smiles practiced and professional, but I could see it in their eyes, that flicker of concern when they looked at my paperwork, at the blank space where father should have been, at the address in the worst part of the city. Emma. I'd named her Emma, after my grandmother. The only person who'd ever believed I could be more than what I was. The smell of antiseptic burned my nostrils, mixing with the coffee from the vending machine that I'd been nursing for 3 hours, because I couldn't afford another cup. My clothes, a faded sweater and jeans with a hole in the knee, hung loose on my frame. I'd lost weight during the pregnancy, unable to afford enough food, working double shifts at the diner until my water broke right there on the greasy linoleum floor between tables 7 and 9. "Ms. Carter?" A woman in scrubs approached, her clipboard held against her chest like a shield. "We need to discuss the billing." My stomach dropped. I knew this conversation was coming. I'd been dreading it since the moment the ambulance doors closed behind me. "How much?" My voice came out smaller than I intended, barely a whisper. "The preliminary total is around $87,000. That's for the emergency C-section, the NICU stay, medications, monitoring." The rest of her words dissolved into white noise. 87,000. I made maybe 20,000 a year, and that was before Marcus. Before he took everything and disappeared into whatever hole men like him crawl into when they've destroyed someone completely. "We have payment plans," she continued, her voice gentler now. "And there are programs. I'll figure it out." I stood abruptly, my chair scraping against the linoleum with a sound like a scream. "Can I see her now?" Inside the NICU, I pressed my palm against the warm glass of Emma's incubator. She was so small, so impossibly fragile. Her fingers were the size of matches, her skin translucent enough to see the delicate network of veins beneath. She had my nose, my dark hair. But her eyes, when they opened, were his. That same sharp blue that had first drawn me to Marcus, before I learned that beautiful things can be poisonous. "You'll never want for anything," I whispered to her. "I promise you. Whatever I have to do, you'll have everything." The promise tasted like ash in my mouth because I knew what it really meant. More double shifts. More accepting the way men looked at me at the diner, their eyes crawling over me like insects. More living in that apartment where the heat barely worked, and the neighbors fought loud enough to shake the walls. That night, back in my apartment, I sat on my second-hand couch with my phone in my trembling hands. The hospital bill glowed on the screen. A PDF attachment that might as well have been a death sentence. I'd set up a payment plan, but it was a joke. $200 a month for the next 36 years. I'd be 60 before I paid it off. My thumb hovered over my contacts. I had to try. I had to swallow every last shred of pride and ask. Marcus's number was still there, saved under a name I should have deleted months ago. When he'd left, he'd taken everything. My savings, my grandmother's jewelry, even the decent furniture. But more than that, he'd taken my ability to trust, leaving me hollow and suspicious of every kind word, every gentle touch. I typed out the message, each word feeling like pulling teeth. "Marcus, I had the baby. A girl. She's in the NICU. The hospital bill is $87,000. I know you're gone, but she's your daughter too. I'm not asking you to come back. I'm just asking you to help with this. Please." I attached the hospital bill PDF, my hand shaking so badly I almost dropped the phone. Then, before I could second-guess myself, I hit send. The message showed as delivered. Then, after a moment, read. I waited. 1 minute, 5, 10. No response. Of course not. Why would there be? Marcus had made it clear what I meant to him. Nothing. Less than nothing. Just another stupid girl who believed his lies, who opened her door, and her heart and her body, to a man who saw her as something to use and discard. I set the phone down and let my head fall back against the couch. The apartment was silent, except for the distant sound of sirens and the couple upstairs screaming at each other in Spanish. This was my life now. This was Emma's life, unless I could figure out some way to... My phone vibrated. My heart lurched. I grabbed it, expecting, what? An apology? An excuse? Some pitiful justification for abandoning his own child? The screen showed a notification from my banking app. Deposit, $1,000. I stared at the screen, blinked, looked again. $1 million. That couldn't be right. It had to be a mistake, some glitch in the system. I refreshed the app. The number remained, now joined by another notification. Wire transfer from D. Moretti. My blood went cold. D. Moretti. I didn't know anyone named Moretti. Marcus's last name was Fisher. I'd checked his ID myself, back when I was still naive enough to think that mattered. That knowing someone's real name meant you knew them at all. Before I could process what was happening, my phone rang. Unknown number. My finger trembled as I answered. Hello? Silence on the other end. Not empty silence, the kind filled with someone breathing, waiting, listening. Hello? I repeated, my voice cracking. You sent the wrong man your hospital bill. The voice was low, male, with an accent I couldn't quite place. Something European underneath American English, like expensive cologne that lingers, but I paid it anyway. Who is this? Why would you— The baby, he interrupted, each word measured and deliberate. She's mine. What? No, you don't understand. I understand perfectly, Piccola. The endearment sent ice down my spine. Marcus Fisher worked for me. He stole from me. And now I've found something far more valuable than what he took. The line went dead. I sat frozen, the phone still pressed to my ear, my mind racing through impossible scenarios. Marcus worked for someone? For this Moretti? What did that mean? What had Marcus been involved in, and why would this stranger claim Emma as his? My phone buzzed again. A text from the unknown number. Don't go to the police. Don't try to return the money. Someone will collect you in the morning. Bring nothing but the baby. You belong to me now. The words were simple, factual, delivered with the casual certainty of someone used to being obeyed. Another text followed immediately. Sleep well, Arya. Tomorrow your old life ends. He knew my name. He knew where I lived. He'd sent $1 million like it was nothing. I looked around my shabby apartment with new eyes, suddenly aware of how exposed I was. The locks on my door were flimsy. The windows didn't even close properly. If this man, this Moretti, wanted to find me, hurt me, take Emma, but he'd already had that chance. He'd sent money, not threats. Well, not just threats. You belong to me now. I should call the police. Report the messages. Return the money. Hide. I should run. But where would I run to? And how would I pay Emma's hospital bills? How would I feed her, clothe her, give her any kind of life? The money sat in my account like a ticking bomb. $1 million. Enough to pay every bill, to move somewhere safe, to give Emma everything I'd promised her. All it would cost was my freedom. I walked to the window and pulled back the stained curtain. Down on the street, a black Mercedes sat idling beneath the broken streetlight. Even from 4 floors up, I could see the silhouette of someone in the driver's seat, watching my building. Watching me. I let the curtain fall and backed away, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. Tomorrow morning, someone would come, and I had until then to decide whether I would open the door or try to run from a man who already seemed to know every move I might make. I looked at the photo on my phone, the one the nurse had taken of Emma this afternoon. Her tiny face, peaceful in sleep, innocent. Unaware that her mother's mistake had just sold them both to a stranger who spoke with the quiet certainty of someone who'd never been told no. She's mine, he'd said. Not, can I help? Not, let me explain. Mine. Like I'd already agreed. Like the choice had already been made. I sank onto the couch, pulled my knees to my chest, and watched the numbers on my phone clock change, each minute bringing me closer to morning. closer to whatever this Moretti had planned. The Mercedes remained on the street below, a silent promise. Or a threat. In this neighborhood, they were usually the same thing. I didn't sleep. How could I? Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that message glowing on my phone screen. You belong to me now. The words had branded themselves into my mind, burning there like a cattle mark. By the time dawn broke, painting my apartment in shades of gray and amber, I'd made my decision. Not because I wanted to, but because I didn't have a choice. The $1 million sat in my account like evidence of a crime I hadn't committed, and the black Mercedes had remained on my street all night, a patient predator waiting for morning. I packed a diaper bag for Emma, the only thing I owned that was actually new, bought with my last paycheck before she was born. Everything else could stay. My clothes were worn and cheap anyway. My furniture was garbage. The only things of value I'd ever owned, Marcus had already stolen. The hospital released Emma at 8 a.m. She was so small in my arms, wrapped in a pink blanket the nurses had given us. Charity, though they'd been kind enough not to call it that. Her eyes opened briefly, that sharp blue that didn't belong to me, and I felt my chest tighten with a love so fierce it physically hurt. Whatever happens, I whispered against her soft hair. I won't let anyone hurt you. The words felt hollow, even as I said them. I was 23 years old, broke, alone, and apparently in debt to a man who could make $1 million appear overnight. What could I possibly do to protect her? The Mercedes was waiting when we stepped outside the hospital. Not the same one from last night. This one was newer, sleeker. Its black paint so pristine it reflected the morning sky like dark water. The windows were tinted completely opaque. Illegal, probably. But men like this Moretti clearly didn't worry about traffic laws. The driver emerged before I could take more than 3 steps toward the curb. He was enormous. Not fat, but built like he'd been constructed from concrete and violence. His suit was expensive, tailored to accommodate the bulk of his shoulders, and when he moved to open the back door, I caught the telltale bulge of a gun beneath his jacket. Miss Carter. His voice was surprisingly gentle, at odds with his appearance. I'm Vincent. Mr. Moretti sent me to bring you home. Home. As if I had any idea where that meant. I need to get some things from my apartment first. Everything you need will be provided. It wasn't a suggestion. Vincent's expression remained polite, but there was steel underneath. Please, ma'am. The car. I looked down at Emma, still sleeping against my chest, her tiny fingers curled into my shirt, holding on with that instinctive grip newborns have, like she knew I was her only anchor in a world that had suddenly become very dangerous. I got in the car. The interior smelled like leather and something else, cologne, expensive and subtle. The seats were heated despite the mild morning, and there were bottles of water in a built-in cooler, along with what looked like premium baby formula and sterilized bottles. He'd prepared for us. For Emma. The realization made my skin crawl and my heart race in equal measure. Vincent drove in silence, taking streets I didn't recognize, leaving my neighborhood behind. We passed through parts of the city I'd only seen on TV, where buildings were made of glass and steel instead of crumbling brick, where people walked with purpose instead of hunched against the weight of just surviving. After 30 minutes, we turned onto a private road. Trees lined both sides, their branches forming a canopy that filtered the sunlight into dancing shadows. At the end stood gates, massive wrought iron things that probably cost more than I'd earn in a lifetime. They opened automatically as we approached. The house beyond wasn't a house, it was an estate. Stone and glass rose 3 stories high, surrounded by manicured gardens that looked like something from a magazine. A fountain stood in the circular driveway, water cascading over marble statues. The whole place screamed money, not new money, but the old kind. The kind that came from generations of taking what you wanted and calling it legacy. My hands were shaking as Vincent opened my door. He's waiting in his study, Vincent said, offering his arm to help me out. When I hesitated, his expression softened slightly. You're safe here, Ms. Carter. Mr. Moretti doesn't hurt women or children. It's against his code. Code. As if criminals operated on honor, but I took his arm anyway, because Emma was starting to fuss and I needed both hands to support her properly. Inside, the house was even more overwhelming. The foyer alone was larger than my entire apartment, with floors of polished marble and a chandelier that cast rainbow prisms across the walls. Everything was pristine, elegant, designed to intimidate. Vincent led me through corridors hung with original artwork. I recognized a Monet, or at least what looked like one, until we reached a set of double doors made of dark wood carved with intricate patterns. He knocked once. A voice from within, that same low, accented voice from the phone, said something in Italian. Vincent opened the doors and gestured for me to enter alone. The study was all dark wood and leather, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves packed with volumes in multiple languages. A massive desk dominated one end, papers spread across its surface next to a laptop showing what looked like stock reports, but I barely registered any of that. Because behind the desk sat the most dangerous-looking man I'd ever seen. Dante Moretti was younger than I'd expected, maybe mid-30s, though it was hard to tell. His face was all sharp angles and cold beauty, like a Renaissance painting of a fallen angel. Dark hair swept back from his forehead, revealing a face that was somehow both refined and brutal. He wore a black suit that probably cost more than a year of my rent, tailored perfectly to his lean, muscular frame. But it was his eyes that stopped my breath. Gray, not blue, not quite green, but the color of winter storms. And they were fixed on me with an intensity that made me feel simultaneously naked and seen for the first time in my life. He didn't smile, didn't move, just watched as I stood in his doorway, clutching my daughter like a shield. Then his gaze dropped to Emma, and something flickered across his face. Something almost human before his features settled back into that mask of cold control. Sit. He gestured to a leather chair across from his desk. I sat, because my legs were shaking too badly to keep standing. You paid my hospital bill, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. You sent me $1 million. You said Emma was yours. I need you to explain what the hell is going on. One dark eyebrow rose slightly. You need? The quiet danger in those two words made me falter, but I forced myself to hold his gaze. Yes, I need to understand. Because I'm not leaving this room until I do. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, slowly, his lips curved into something that might have been a smile on someone less terrifying. Marcus Fisher stole from me 6 months ago, Dante said, each word precise. $500,000, skimmed from various accounts he managed for my organization. He thought he was clever. He thought he could disappear. Your organization. My voice came out flat. You mean the Mafia. I prefer family business, but yes. No shame, no euphemism. Just fact. Marcus ran. I found him 3 weeks ago in Atlantic City. By then, he'd gambled away most of what he'd stolen. But before I could have our conversation, he mentioned something interesting. Dante stood, moving around the desk with a predator's grace. I shrank back in my chair, but he didn't approach. Instead, he walked to the window, hands clasped behind his back. He said he'd left something valuable behind. A woman pregnant with his child. Dante's reflection in the glass turned to look at me. He laughed about it, said you were nothing, nobody, that the baby wasn't worth the trouble of acknowledging. My chest tightened with humiliation and old pain. I asked him if he was certain the child was his. Dante continued. He said yes. Said you'd been faithful, desperate, exactly the kind of stupid girl who'd believe his lies. Those gray eyes met mine in the reflection. So I made him a deal. His life, for everything he'd stolen, including what he abandoned. The room felt too small suddenly, the air too thin. You can't. People aren't property. You can't just. I can. He turned to face me fully now, and there was something burning in his eyes that hadn't been there before. Marcus stole from me, disrespected me. The money he took I can replace. But the principal? That requires compensation. So this is revenge? You're going to what? Keep me prisoner? The single word cracked like a whip. No. Dante moved closer, and I pressed back in my chair. But he only crouched down to my eye level, bringing that intense focus to bear fully on my face. Listen carefully, Arya. Marcus told me you had nothing, no family, no friends who mattered, no resources. He told me you were working yourself to death in a diner, living in an apartment that should be condemned. Each word was true, and each one felt like a slap. He told me, Dante continued, his voice dropping lower, that when you had the baby, you'd probably give it up, or worse. Tears burned my eyes. I would never. I know. His hand rose, and I flinched, but he only brushed away a tear that had escaped down my cheek. His touch was unexpectedly gentle, warm, because you sent him that message, begging for help, for your daughter. Not for yourself, for her. He stood abruptly and returned to his desk, and I could breathe again. So here is the situation, Dante said, his tone businesslike now. Marcus owes me. You and the child are payment for that debt. But unlike him, I take care of what's mine. You'll live here. Emma will have everything she needs. Doctors, clothes, education. You'll want for nothing. In exchange for what? My voice was barely a whisper. Those storm-gray eyes pinned me. Your loyalty, your presence, your obedience. A pause. And eventually, when I decide the time is right, your body. The room spun. You can't. That's human trafficking, kidnapping. Dante's smile was cold. Call it what you want. But look at your daughter, Arya. Look at her. And tell me honestly, where else can you give her this life? What other options do you have? I looked down at Emma. She'd fallen back asleep, her tiny face peaceful, unaware that her mother had just been purchased like livestock. But he was right. God help me, he was right. I had nothing, no one. The $1 million in my account would disappear eventually, and then what? Back to the diner? Back to that apartment where I couldn't even keep the heat on consistently? I won't hurt you, Dante said, and something in his voice made me look up. Not unless you force me to. Follow my rules, and you'll be treated well. Fight me, and, well, I'm a patient man, but my patience has limits. What about Emma? When she's older, what will you tell her about the truth? He said it simply, like it was obvious, that her father was a thief and a coward, that I took responsibility for his debts, that I protected her and her mother when no one else would. His eyes held mine. She'll be raised knowing who I am, what I do, and she'll be raised to understand loyalty, family, honor, everything Marcus Fisher lacked. A knock at the door interrupted us. Vincent entered, followed by a woman in her 50s wearing a crisp uniform. This is Mrs. Chen, Dante said. She'll show you to your rooms and help you get settled. Everything you need has been prepared. If there's anything missing, tell her, and it will be provided. I stood on shaking legs, clutching Emma close. Arya? Dante's voice stopped me at the door. When I turned, his expression was unreadable. Welcome home. The words should have sounded warm. Instead, they sounded like a prison sentence being read aloud. Mrs. Chen led me through more corridors to a suite on the second floor. Suite, not a room, but an entire apartment. Bedroom, bathroom, sitting area, and a nursery that looked like something from a catalog. The crib alone probably cost thousands, all white and gold with a mobile of crystal stars that caught the light. Mr. Moretti had everything prepared when he learned about the baby, Mrs. Chen said in accented English. If you need anything, there's an intercom. Press the blue button for me, red for Vincent, black for Mr. Moretti directly. She left me alone in that beautiful prison, surrounded by luxury I'd never imagined, holding the daughter I'd die to protect. Through the window, I could see the gates at the end of the long driveway. They looked very far away. I laid Emma in the crib and watched her sleep, her chest rising and falling with each tiny breath. I'm sorry, I whispered. I'm so sorry. But sorry wasn't going to get us out of here. And a terrible part of me wasn't sure I wanted to leave. The first week passed in a strange dreamlike state, where reality felt suspended, replaced by something gilded and suffocating. I learned the rhythms of Dante's house. When he left in the mornings, always before dawn, the sound of his car engine a low growl that vibrated through the walls. When he returned, usually late, footsteps echoing down the marble corridors like a countdown. Mrs. Chen brought meals 3 times a day. Real meals. Not the ramen and canned soup I'd lived on for months. Grilled salmon, fresh vegetables, homemade bread that was still warm when she set it on the tray. My body didn't know what to do with actual nutrition. I'd look down at my plate and feel guilt war with hunger, knowing that each bite was paid for with my freedom. Emma thrived. That was the worst part, watching her flourish in captivity. The pediatrician Dante hired came twice in those first 7 days. A kind older woman who examined Emma with gentle hands and pronounced her perfectly healthy. The nursery had everything: sterilizers, warmers, monitors that tracked her breathing and heart rate. Technology I couldn't have afforded in a lifetime of diner shifts. I saw Dante only in glimpses. A shadow passing by the door, his voice from downstairs, speaking rapid Italian into his phone. Once, at 3 a.m, when Emma wouldn't stop crying and I'd paced the sitting room for hours, I'd looked up to find him standing in my doorway, watching. He hadn't said anything. Just stood there in silk pajama bottoms and nothing else, his lean torso marked with scars that told stories I probably didn't want to know. "She won't settle," I'd said, exhausted enough to forget to be afraid. "I've tried everything." He'd crossed the room in 3 strides, taken Emma from my arms, and she'd quieted immediately. Just like that. Gone from screaming to sleeping against his bare chest, like she'd found exactly where she belonged. "Babies sense fear," he'd said, his voice low in the darkness. "She feels your tension. Of course I'm tense. I'm a prisoner. You're protected." His eyes had met mine over Emma's head. "There's a difference." He'd handed her back after a few minutes, his fingers brushing mine in the exchange, warm and careful. Then he'd left without another word, and I'd stood there trembling, unsure if it was from fear or something far more dangerous. On the 8th day, everything changed. I was feeding Emma in the nursery when Vincent appeared at the door, his expression grim. "Mr. Moretti wants to see you downstairs." Now, the urgency in his voice made my stomach clench. "What's wrong? Is it—" "Bring the baby. Mrs. Chen will watch her." 5 minutes later, I was being escorted to a part of the house I hadn't seen before, downstairs that led to a basement level, through a door that required Vincent to enter a code. The corridor beyond was concrete and utilitarian, nothing like the luxury upstairs. We stopped at a heavy metal door. Vincent knocked twice, then opened it. The room beyond looked like something from a movie. The wrong kind of movie. Concrete floors with a drain in the center. Metal chairs. And Dante, standing over a man who was tied to one of those chairs, blood dripping from his nose onto his shirt. Marcus. My breath stopped. He looked terrible, thinner than I remembered, his face bruised and swollen. But his eyes, when they found mine, still held that same arrogance, that same contempt. "Arya." Dante's voice was calm, conversational, like we were meeting for tea instead of in what was clearly a torture room. "Come here." My legs wouldn't move. Now. Not loud, not angry, just absolute. I walked forward on numb feet, stopping a few feet away from Marcus. Up close, I could smell him, sweat and fear and something metallic. "Tell her," Dante said to Marcus. "Tell her what you told me." Marcus spat blood onto the floor. "Fuck you." Dante moved so fast I barely saw it. His fist connected with Marcus's jaw with a crack that made me flinch. Marcus's head snapped back, more blood spraying. "Tell her," Dante repeated, "or I'll make this last days instead of hours." Marcus laughed, a wet, broken sound. Then his eyes found mine, and I saw something there I'd never seen before. Genuine hatred. "The baby's not mine," he said. The words didn't make sense. I stared at him, trying to process. "What?" "Not mine," he repeated, enjoying this now, enjoying my confusion. "You think I'm the only one who was fucking you? Jesus, Arya, you were so easy, so desperate, you never even suspected." My chest felt like it was caving in. "You're lying." "You said—" "I never—" "That night," Marcus continued, his smile vicious despite the blood, "when you got so drunk at that party, when you passed out and I took care of you." He made air quotes with his bound hands. "I wasn't the only one in that room, sweetheart. My buddy Jake had you first, then Tommy, then me. You were so out of it you never even knew. The room spun. I remembered that night, barely. Waking up confused, sore. Marcus telling me we'd had sex, and I'd just been too drunk to remember. I'd believed him. Why wouldn't I? I'd trusted him. "You're lying," I whispered, but my voice had no conviction. "Am I?" Marcus's eyes glittered with malice. "How do you think you got pregnant? I always used condoms, baby. Always." "But Jake?" "Jake doesn't believe in them." I was going to be sick. The floor tilted, and I felt Dante's hand on my elbow, steadying me. "Continue," Dante said to Marcus, his voice cold as winter. "So yeah, the kid's probably Jake's. Or Tommy's. Who the fuck knows?" Marcus shrugged as much as his restraints allowed. "Point is, not my problem. Not my kid. Just another mistake in a long line of your stupid—" I didn't remember moving. 1 second I was standing frozen. The next my hand was swinging toward Marcus's face, nails extended like claws. I wanted to hurt him. Wanted to make him bleed the way he'd made me bleed emotionally for months. But Dante caught my wrist mid-swing, pulled me back against his chest. "Enough," he said quietly in my ear. "He's not worth it. I couldn't get words out past the rage and betrayal choking me. He let them. He watched. I know. Dante's arms wrapped around me from behind, holding me still as I shook. "I know, Piccola, but you don't dirty your hands with garbage. That's what men like Vincent are for." And he said something in Italian. Vincent moved forward, and Marcus's arrogance finally cracked into fear. "Wait, we had a deal. You said if I told the truth." "I said I'd make it quick," Dante corrected. "I didn't say you'd live." "No, please, I told you what you wanted." Dante turned me around, blocking my view, his hands on my face, forcing me to look at him instead of what was about to happen behind us. His gray eyes were intense, searching. "Did you know?" he asked. "About the others?" "No." The word came out broken. "I swear, I would never." "I believe you." Simple. Certain. Like my word was law. "Then you're not at fault." "They are." A sound behind us. Wet, final. I tried to look, but Dante held my face still. "Don't," he said firmly. "You don't need that in your head. Trust me." "Emma," I whispered, because it was the only thing I could focus on. "If she's not his, then she's still yours." Dante's thumb brushed my cheek, catching a tear I hadn't realized was falling, still under my protection. The debt was never about biology, Arya. It was about principle. Marcus abandoned you both. That's what matters. "But I don't understand. Why would you—" "Because," he interrupted, his voice dropping lower, more intimate. "From the moment Vincent showed me your picture, that message you sent begging for help, I knew. You were mine. Maybe not by birth, maybe not by choice, but by right of conquest, by right of care, by right of the fact that I want you, and I take what I want." His honesty was brutal, terrifying, but there was something else in his eyes now. Something that looked almost like possessiveness mixed with something softer. "The men who hurt you," he continued. "Jake and Tommy. I need their full names." My mind was still reeling, trying to process everything. Why? "Because no one touches what's mine and lives." He said it simply, like commenting on the weather. "Their names, Arya." I should have said no. Should have refused to be part of whatever violence he was planning, but when I closed my eyes, I could almost feel phantom hands on my body. Violations I couldn't remember but knew had happened. My stomach turned. "Jake Morrison," I heard myself say. "Tommy Chen." No relation to Mrs. Chen. They were Marcus's friends from the casino. Dante nodded and looked past me to Vincent. More Italian, rapid and commanding. Vincent left immediately. Then Dante's attention was back on me, his hands still framing my face like I was something precious instead of purchased. "You're shaking," he observed. Everything I thought I knew was a lie. My voice cracked. My entire pregnancy, I thought. I believed. "Come." He took my hand, led me out of that room and back upstairs. Not to my suite, but to his, a massive space done in dark colors and clean lines. He sat me on his bed, disappeared into his bathroom, and returned with a glass of water and a small pill. "What is it?" "Something to calm you. Prescribed. Not recreational." Your choice. I took it. I needed something to stop the shaking, the nausea, the feeling that my entire world had shattered. Dante sat beside me on the bed, close enough that I could feel his body heat. We stayed like that in silence until the medication started to work, the sharp edges of panic softening into something manageable. When I was 16, Dante said suddenly, my father's enemies took my sister. She was 12. They sent her back in pieces. I turned to look at him, shocked by the confession. His jaw was tight, eyes distant. I learned then that mercy is a luxury, that protecting what matters requires violence, that love and blood often flow together. Is that what this is? I asked quietly. Love? No. His eyes refocused on me. Not yet. Right now it's obsession, possession, the need to own something beautiful and break anyone who tries to take it away. He reached out, tucked a strand of hair behind my ear, but it could become love, given time, given trust. You can't force someone to love you, no. His lips curved in that dangerous, almost smile. But I can keep you close enough, safe enough, satisfied enough that eventually you choose to stay, even if the gates were open. He was insane. This whole situation was insane. But his hand was warm on my face, and Emma was safe in her nursery, and for the first time since Marcus left, I felt something other than alone. I need to check on Emma, I said, standing on unsteady legs. Mrs. Chen has her. Rest first. Not a command this time, almost a request. I can't sleep in your bed, then sleep in yours. But know that from now on, my door is always open to you. When the nightmares come, and they will, you don't have to face them alone. I left his room, walked back to my suite on trembling legs. Mrs. Chen was in the nursery, rocking Emma and humming something in Mandarin. She looked up when I entered, her expression kind. She's fed and changed, sleeping like an angel. She stood, transferred Emma to the crib with practiced care. You should rest too, dear. You've had a shock. How did she know? But then again, everyone in this house probably knew everything. There were no secrets in a place like this. Alone in my room, I lay on the bed and stared at the ceiling. Marcus was dead. The man who'd assaulted me would be next. Emma wasn't Marcus's daughter. She was the child of a monster I couldn't even remember clearly. And Dante Moretti, Mafia boss and killer, had just offered me comfort in his bed and promised me protection for reasons I still didn't fully understand. I should have been horrified, terrified, planning escape. Instead, I felt something dangerous uncurling in my chest, something that felt almost like relief. The gates were locked. The house was a prison, but maybe some cages were safer than freedom. 3 weeks passed like pages turning in a book I couldn't put down, each day drawing me deeper into Dante's world despite every instinct screaming that I should resist. The nightmares came, just as he'd predicted. I'd wake gasping, phantom hands on my skin, Marcus's laughter echoing in my ears mixed with voices I couldn't place. Jake, Tommy, men whose faces I couldn't remember, but whose violations my body somehow knew. The first time I'd pressed my face into my pillow and sobbed silently, not wanting to wake Emma. The second time I'd found myself walking down the hall to Dante's room before I'd consciously decided to move. He'd been awake, sitting up in bed reading something on his tablet, the lamp casting shadows across his bare chest. He hadn't asked questions, just pulled back the covers, let me climb in, and held me while I shook. His heartbeat had been steady against my ear, his hand stroking my hair with surprising gentleness. "You're safe," he'd murmured. "I have you. Nothing will touch you here." I'd fallen asleep there and woken alone, back in my own bed, with no memory of being carried. But Emma's morning bottle had been waiting, still warm, and there'd been a note in sharp, masculine handwriting. "Next time, just come. Don't wait until you're breaking." After that, the lines blurred. I started eating breakfast with him, not because he demanded it, but because Mrs. Chen would bring 2 trays to the morning room where he read the newspaper, and I fed Emma. He'd comment on articles, ask my opinion on things that shouldn't have mattered to someone in my position. Politics, economics, the state of the world. At first, I'd given short answers, remembered I was a prisoner. But Dante had a way of listening, really listening, that made words spill out before I could stop them. He never patronized, never dismissed. When I said something he disagreed with, he'd argue, but intellectually, treating my thoughts as worthy of debate. "You're smarter than you believe you are," he'd said one morning, looking at me over the rim of his coffee cup. "Marcus made you think you were nothing. But you're not. You never were." The compliment had warmed something in my chest that should have stayed cold. Emma was growing. 6 weeks old now, her features sharpening into something distinctive. She had my nose, my mouth. But those eyes, those sharp blue eyes, were Jake's or Tommy's, and every time I looked at them, I felt a complex tangle of love and revulsion. Dante noticed. He noticed everything. "She's innocent of their sins," he said one afternoon, finding me in the nursery, staring at Emma with tears on my face. "Whatever evil created her, she's pure. You know this." "I do." I wiped my eyes, but sometimes when I look at her, I see them. I see that night I can't remember, and Then look at me instead. He'd taken Emma from the crib, held her with a confidence that shouldn't have existed in someone so dangerous. She'd cooed at him, tiny fingers grasping his thumb. "See how I look at her, like she's precious, like she's worth protecting. Let that replace the poison in your head." And God help me, it had worked. Watching Dante with Emma, this man who killed without remorse, who ran an empire built on violence, cradle my daughter like she was made of glass, had rewritten something in my brain. He was good with her, patient in ways that shocked me. He'd come home late at night, blood sometimes on his cuffs that he thought I didn't notice, and go straight to the nursery. I'd find him standing over her crib, just watching her sleep, his expression unguarded in those moments. Once, I'd asked him why. "Because she's yours," he'd said simply, "and what's yours is mine to protect." The possessiveness should have angered me. Instead, it made me feel something I hadn't felt since before Marcus. Wanted. Not for my body, not for what I could give, but wanted for myself, valued as something worth keeping. It was Stockholm Syndrome, probably. Some psychological twist that made captives fall for their captors. I knew this, recognized it, but knowing didn't make it stop. Vincent had returned after 2 weeks with news delivered in Italian, while I sat in the morning room pretending not to listen. I'd picked up enough to understand. Jake Morrison and Tommy Chen were no longer problems. Their bodies wouldn't be found. I should have been horrified, should have mourned, however briefly, for human lives ended. Instead, I'd slept soundly that night for the first time since learning the truth. The turning point came on a Tuesday. Dante had meetings all day, the kind where men in expensive suits arrived in armored cars and left looking either satisfied or terrified. I'd learned to stay in my suite during these times, understanding instinctively that some parts of his world I was better off not seeing. But Emma had been fussy all afternoon, crying inconsolably despite every attempt to soothe her. By evening, I was exhausted and desperate, walking circles in the nursery while she screamed against my shoulder. The door opened. A woman stood there, mid-20s, beautiful in that polished, expensive way. Designer dress, perfect makeup, dripping with jewelry. She looked at me with undisguised contempt. "So you're the charity case," she said, her accent Italian and thick. "Dante's latest pet." I clutched Emma tighter. "Who are you?" "Isabella Russo. My father does business with Dante. We've known each other since childhood." She stepped into the room uninvited, her heels clicking on the hardwood. "We were supposed to be married before you showed up." My stomach dropped. This wasn't my choice. "Of course not. Girls like you never have choices. You just exist, waiting for men like Dante to notice you, to save you." Her smile was cruel, but here's what you need to understand. He'll get bored. Men like him always do, and when he does, you'll be back in whatever gutter he found you in, but this time with a bastard child and a reputation. Get out. My voice was shaking but firm. "You have no right to. I have every right. This was supposed to be my home. my position, until Dante decided to play savior with some Isabella. Dante's voice from the doorway was cold enough to frost the windows. Leave, now. Isabella turned, her expression shifting instantly to something seductive. Dante, I was just insulting what's mine. He crossed the room in 3 strides, positioned himself between us. In my house, after being told you weren't welcome here. Your father invited mine for the meeting. I just wanted to see. You wanted to mark territory that was never yours. Dante's voice dropped to something deadly quiet. I'll make this simple. Arya and Emma are under my protection. That means they're untouchable. Speak to or about them again with anything less than respect, and I'll forget that our families have history. Are we clear? Isabella's face flushed with humiliation and rage. She's nothing, Dante. A nobody. Why would you... Get out. 2 words, spoken with such absolute authority that Isabella flinched. Vincent will escort you out. Tell your father if he can't control you. We'll revisit our arrangement. Isabella shot me one last poisonous look before stalking out. The slam of the door made Emma cry harder. Dante turned to me, his expression softening. Give her to me. I hesitated, then handed Emma over. He took her, began that gentle rocking motion that always seemed to work for him, and within minutes, her cries had reduced to hiccups. I'm sorry, I said quietly. I didn't invite her here. I swear. I know. He looked at me over Emma's head. Isabella has been persistent. She believed an arrangement made when we were children would materialize into marriage. I've told her repeatedly it won't, because of me. Because of many reasons. You're just the most recent. He carried Emma to the crib, laid her down with practiced care, then turned back to me. But yes, partially because of you. My heart was beating too fast. Why? I'm exactly what she said. Nobody, nothing. Stop. He crossed to me, his hands framing my face with that familiar gentleness that contradicted everything else about him. You're not nothing. You're a woman who worked herself to exhaustion for minimum wage while pregnant. Who begged the man who abandoned her for help. Not for herself, but for her child. Who's adapted to an impossible situation with grace and strength. His thumb stroked my cheekbones. You're resourceful, intelligent, resilient, and you're beautiful in ways Isabella's money can't buy. I'm broken, I whispered. Damaged. I can't even remember being. Then I'll help you forget what you can't remember and remember what matters. He leaned closer, his breath warm against my lips. You think I don't see you? I see everything, Arya. How you bite your lip when you're thinking. How you hum while feeding Emma. How you're terrified of me but stand up to me anyway when it matters. I should hate you. My hands had somehow found their way to his chest, feeling his heartbeat under my palms. You bought me. Kept me prisoner. Yes. No denial. No justification. But I also protected you, gave you safety. Killed the men who hurt you. His forehead touched mine. And somewhere in these weeks, this stopped being about debt and became about this. You and me and Emma. A family built on fucked up foundations maybe, but a family nonetheless. This is insane. Probably. His lips curved into that dangerous smile. But answer me honestly. When you wake from nightmares, where do you go? Your room, I admitted. When you're happy, who do you want to tell? You. When you think about the future, what do you see? I closed my eyes. This. Here. You. Then maybe insane is exactly what we need to be. He kissed me. Not demanding, not forceful. Questioning, asking permission even as he took it. His lips were warm, firm, tasting faintly of the whiskey he'd been drinking. My mind screamed that this was wrong, that I was confusing safety with love, captivity with choice, but my body responded anyway, melting into him, hands sliding up to tangle in his hair. The kiss deepened, his arms wrapping around me, pulling me flush against him. I could feel his control, how carefully he was holding back, treating me like something that might break. When he pulled away, we were both breathing hard. I want you, he said, brutal honesty in those gray eyes. I've wanted you since the first moment I saw your picture. But I won't take you until you're ready. Until you come to me, not because you feel you have to, but because you want to. And if that never happens, then I'll wait anyway. He kissed my forehead, gentle and chaste. I'm a patient man, Piccola, and you're worth waiting for. He left me standing there in the nursery, my lips still burning from his kiss, my heart racing with feelings I couldn't name. That night, I didn't have nightmares. I dreamed instead of gray eyes and gentle hands, of a monster who held babies like they were precious, who killed for me and called it protection. I dreamed of a cage that had started to feel like home. And when I woke, I realized with equal parts terror and relief that I didn't want to leave anymore. The next morning, I found a gift on my breakfast tray, a key on a silver chain, for the gates, the note read in Dante's sharp handwriting. You were never really a prisoner, only I didn't know how to tell you that you could stay by choice until now. The decision is yours, always was. I held the key in my trembling hand and realized he was right. I'd stopped being a prisoner weeks ago. I'd become something far more dangerous, willing. I kept the key on its silver chain around my neck, hidden beneath my clothes where it rested against my heartbeat, a constant reminder that I was choosing this. Choosing him. The weight of it felt like both freedom and surrender, and I couldn't decide which terrified me more. The weeks that followed transformed everything. Dante stopped pretending this was purely about debt or protection. He courted me, if courting was the right word for what a mafia boss did when he wanted something. Flowers appeared in my room, always gardenias because he'd noticed they were my favorite. Books I'd mentioned wanting to read materialized on my nightstand. He'd rearrange his schedule to eat dinner with Emma and me, trading his blood-stained world for an hour of domesticity that shouldn't have worked, but somehow did. Tell me about before, I said one evening. We were in his study, Emma sleeping in a bassinet nearby, while I curled in the leather chair across from his desk. He'd been reviewing contracts, but his attention had been drifting to me for the past 20 minutes. Before what? Before this. Before you became... I gestured vaguely at the opulence around us, the power he wore like a second skin. Dante set down his pen, leaned back in his chair. I was 12 when my father sat me down and explained what our family really was. Not businessmen, not entrepreneurs, criminals. He said I had a choice. Embrace it or walk away and never look back. You embraced it. After my sister died, yes. Pain flickered across his face, brief but devastating. I couldn't walk away from the men who'd failed to protect her. So, I learned, became better, harder, more ruthless than my father ever was. By 25, I'd taken over. By 30, I'd eliminated every rival who'd ever threatened us. Do you regret it? I regret what it cost me. Simple. Normal relationships, trust, the ability to go anywhere without guards. But the power itself, that's what keeps people like you safe. That's what let me destroy the men who hurt you. He stood, moved around the desk to crouch in front of my chair, his hands on the armrests caging me in. I'm not a good man, Arya. I never will be. But I can be good to you, good for you, if you'll let me. My hand rose, traced the scar on his cheekbone, a thin line I'd been curious about for weeks. How did you get this? Knife fight when I was 17. The other guy didn't survive. He caught my hand, pressed a kiss to my palm. I have dozens of scars, each one a story of violence. Does that frighten you? It should. My thumb brushed his lower lip. But somehow it doesn't. Maybe I'm as broken as you are. Or maybe, he murmured, turning his head to kiss my wrist. We're exactly what each other needs. Emma chose that moment to wake, her soft cries interrupting us. Dante rose smoothly, lifted her from the bassinet with practiced ease. Hey, Principessa, he murmured, rocking her gently. Shh, I've got you. Watching him with her never stopped affecting me. This dangerous man transformed by a baby's presence into something tender. Emma adored him, would settle for him faster than for me sometimes, which should have bothered me, but instead felt right. I need to tell you something, I said suddenly. Dante looked up, still swaying with Emma. What is it? I went to the doctor yesterday, the one you arranged. I took a breath. She said I'm healing well, that physically I'm okay now. From the birth, I mean. Understanding dawned in his eyes, heat following immediately after. Arya, I'm not saying I'm ready, but I wanted you to know that the only thing stopping me now is me. My fear, my hesitation, not my body. He crossed to me, Emma against his shoulder, and looked down at me with an intensity that made my breath catch. Then we wait until there's no fear. Until you come to me absolutely certain. What if I'm never certain? Then I'll love you anyway. The words were quiet, devastating. Yes, love. Because that's what this became when I stopped thinking of you as debt and started thinking of you as mine in every way that matters. My eyes burned with tears. You can't love me. You barely know me. I know you bite your lip when you're anxious. I know you hum the same lullaby your grandmother sang to you. I know you're terrified of thunderstorms, but pretend not to be. I know you take your coffee with too much sugar and read the last page of books first to make sure they end well. He shifted Emma to one arm, used his free hand to wipe my tears. I know you're brave and broken and beautiful, and I know I'd burn this entire city down before I'd let anyone hurt you again. That's not love. That's obsession. With you, Piccola, they're the same thing. He kissed me then, soft and deep, Emma between us like a bridge between his world and mine. When he pulled back, his smile was gentle. No pressure, no expectations. Just know that whenever you're ready, if you're ever ready, I'll be here. 2 months after that conversation, autumn arrived with crisp air and leaves turning gold. Emma was 4 months old, smiling now, recognizing faces. She'd laugh when Dante made ridiculous faces at her, would reach for him when he entered a room. She was ours, not by biology, but by choice and care and love. I'd stopped having nightmares, started sleeping through the night in my own bed, though some mornings I'd wake to find Dante had been there, covers tucked around me, a note left on my nightstand with simple messages. You smiled in your sleep. It was beautiful. Or, Emma woke at 3. I handled it. Rest. Mrs. Chen had become more friend than staff, teaching me to cook properly, sharing stories about her own children grown and scattered across the country. Vincent still intimidated me, but he'd also started bringing little gifts for Emma. Stuffed animals, blankets, once a delicate mobile he'd carved himself from wood. This was my life now, this house, these people, this strange family built on violence and protection and something that felt dangerously close to love. The night I went to Dante's room, it wasn't because of nightmares. It was because I'd realized I didn't want to be in my bed anymore. I wanted to be in his. He was awake, reading in bed like always, wearing only silk pajama bottoms. His chest was bare, marked with those scars that told stories of survival. He looked up when I entered, surprise flickering across his face. Arya, is Emma? She's fine. Sleeping. I closed the door behind me, suddenly nervous. The key on its chain felt heavy against my sternum. I'm here because I want to be. Understanding dawned slowly, followed by something fierce and possessive that made my stomach flutter with anticipation rather than fear. Are you certain? He set aside his book, giving me his complete attention. Because if you're not, I'm certain. I crossed to the bed, my hands trembling slightly. I've been certain for weeks. I just needed to stop being afraid. And now? Now I'm terrified. I laughed shakily. But not of you. Of how much I want this. Want you. After everything, that should be impossible, but... He moved faster than I expected, suddenly in front of me, his hands gentle on my face. It's not impossible. It's healing. It's choosing to take back what was stolen from you. His thumbs stroked my cheeks. We go at your pace. You say stop. We stop. No questions, no consequences. Understood? I nodded, not trusting my voice. What happened next was nothing like that night I couldn't remember. Dante was patient, reverent, treating my body like something sacred. Every touch asked permission, every kiss worshipped. When I tensed, he'd slow down, wait for me to relax, whisper reassurances against my skin. You're safe. I have you. Nothing will hurt you here. He'd said those words before, but now they carried different weight. He made me feel cherished, desired, whole, everything Marcus had stolen and Dante was giving back. Afterward, I lay against his chest, listening to his heartbeat slow, his fingers trailing patterns on my bare shoulder. "I love you," I whispered into the darkness. His arms tightened around me. "I know. I've known for weeks." Arrogant. Observant. He kissed the top of my head. "I love you too. Have since the moment you stood in my study holding Emma, terrified but defiant. You were supposed to be a transaction. Instead, you became everything." "What happens now?" "Now?" He shifted so he could look at me. "Now we build something real. You, me, Emma. A family that doesn't apologize for how it started because it knows where it's going." "And where's that?" His smile was pure warmth. "Everywhere. Anywhere. As long as we're together." 6 months later, we were married in a small ceremony in the garden. Just family and close friends. Mrs. Chen cried. Vincent actually smiled. Emma, dressed in a tiny white dress, babbled happily throughout the vows. I wore gardenias in my hair and the key on its silver chain around my neck. Dante wore a black suit and an expression of fierce possessive joy when I said, "I do." Isabella Russo didn't attend. Last I heard, she'd married someone in Naples, far from Dante's territory. Marcus Fisher was buried in an unmarked grave somewhere. I didn't ask where, didn't want to know. Jake Morrison and Tommy Chen had simply ceased to exist, their families told they'd skipped town. No one looked too hard for men who'd been involved with Marcus's casino schemes. The past was buried. What mattered was the future. A year after our wedding, Emma took her first steps, from my arms to Dante's in the morning room, while Mrs. Chen watched with tears in her eyes. She was beautiful, bright, beloved. When people asked if she had my eyes or Dante's, we'd just smile and say she had her own. Because it was true. She wasn't Marcus's daughter, or Jake's, or Tommy's. She was ours. Created by violence, saved by obsession, raised by love. At night, after Emma was asleep, I'd find Dante in his study, or he'd find me in the library, and we'd talk. About everything and nothing. He'd tell me about his day, edited versions that left out the worst violence but were honest about the rest. I'd tell him about Emma's progress, about the degree I'd started working on online because he'd encouraged me to pursue it. "You're not just mine," he'd said, when I'd hesitated about going back to school. "You're yours. Never forget that." The woman I'd been, terrified, alone, desperate, felt like a stranger now. I'd been forged in fire and come out stronger, not despite what happened, but because I'd refused to let it destroy me. Sometimes when Dante held me close in the darkness, I'd think about that first night, the message I'd sent to the wrong number, the $1 million appearing in my account. His voice on the phone saying she's mine with absolute certainty. It should have been the beginning of a nightmare. Instead, it had been the start of salvation. "What are you thinking about?" Dante murmured one night, his lips against my temple. "That I sent that hospital bill to the wrong contact." "Best mistake you ever made," I smiled against his chest. "Best mistake we both made. You could have ignored it." "Never." His arms tightened around me. I saw that message. Desperate, proud, trying so hard to be strong, and I knew. You were mine. I just had to make you understand it too. Pretty arrogant. "Accurate," he corrected. "You're here, aren't you? Wearing my ring, sleeping in my bed, raising our daughter. Our daughter. Not Emma's biological father's. Not the men who'd created her, through choice and love and the family we'd built from darkness." "I'm here," I agreed. "And I'm not leaving." "Good." He kissed me deeply, thoroughly. "Because I'm never letting you go." It should have sounded like a threat. Instead, it sounded like a promise. The kind of promise that wrapped around you like chains made of silk and gold. Binding, yes, but chosen, wanted, cherished. I'd been bought, kept, claimed, but somewhere along the way, I'd claimed him right back. And in the end, that made all the difference. Outside, the gates stood open. They always did now. I could leave any time I wanted. Walk away from this life, this man, this family built on blood and obsession. But I wouldn't. Because the key around my neck had never been about the gates. It had been about my heart. And I'd given that to Dante Moretti freely, completely, irrevocably. Best mistake I ever made.